Hi guys, I've got more fun stuff today. Maybe mostly about Jonah's story and his eclipse and the seven thunders. Maybe a good one for me today about second chances. I'm in the middle of making about 4 or 5 videos right now, and for some reason I keep dropping one and starting work on another. I think it's because everything is so tied together that I just see everything rolling out as some giant, finely woven tapestry, full of so many small, colorful details that it's hard to know where to even look at it all. And I feel myself starting down another subject in my videos, so I stop and tell myself, that should be a whole separate video, and not to go down that road. And the next thing I know, I'm writing down all my thoughts and notes for that other video, and working on a whole other folder full of slides to go with it. So where does one connection end and another start? Well, it doesn't. So where do you sever the connections for a short video for YouTube? And knowing that most people on YouTube won't watch videos that are more than about 2 weeks old, I'm not sure YouTube is even the place for me now. I know a lot of other content creators are having the same issues right now too. They have a massive overall picture to show everyone and talk about, and I see their audience growing, but their latest videos might have thousands of views, yet months worth of their earlier work might only have a few hundred views. And I start to wonder, how does anyone even know what's going on? It would be like picking up a 3-volume novel halfway through book number 3 and thinking you're going to understand any of what's really going on. Well, perhaps I should make a video just talking about what sort of direction I need to be taking my channel and my work in right now. Because I do have a plan that I've also been working on, and that is what I'm calling a video book, to sort of bring it all together without a bunch of fluff talking, but just more of laying out the facts in some sort of orderly fashion. For any newcomers here, you'll have to go through my past videos to catch up on stuff, and while I do have high watch dates, my channel here isn't really about setting or proving out a particular date for a rapture event. I did think that we might be crossing over back on Leap Day, because on my timeline I had written that it was the start of what I was calling a flood of troubles, because it was mirroring the 40 days of Noah's flood. But then I found out that the flood that I was seeing was actually the flooding or filling up of the 7 vials of God's wrath that actually happened in the heavens during those 40 days following Leap Day. And the final vial, Mars, the god of war, being filled with God's wrath exactly during the April 8th eclipse. So I'm on super high watch from now on out. I think I could make a good case for a lot of dates this year. Like, did you know that legend has it that John the Apostle was raptured on May 8th? According to some accounts, he disappeared in a blinding flash of light on May 8th. And they held a festival in Ephesus for 1,000 years on May 8th at his empty tomb and basilica, which was originally built over it. But St. John's Basilica is long gone now. They still hold a big festival in Ephesus on May 8th for St. John the Revelator, even to this day. Hooray for John. Also, on the Christian calendar this year, I see that May 9th is Ascension Day. It marks the 40 days from the book of Acts, when Jesus was taken into the clouds. Luke writes in verse 3 that Jesus showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. And as I've shown in many videos now, May 8th through the 9th back in 2019 was also a huge event on my timeline, when Israel was partying in the streets over their 71st birthday, which was not really the start of the war in heaven, but it was a major part of it all. Then, 10 days later, on May 19th this year, will be the Christian Sunday Pentecost Day too. And I know a lot of people look at all the different Pentecost dates for a possible rapture. Israel will again be celebrating their Independence Day on May 14th this year, which is also coming right up in a few days. I tend to mostly watch the Hebrew calendar and when they are observing certain dates, and their 50th day is Shavuot, which is the day that Moses first ascended the mountain and received the marriage covenant. That date is not until June 12th this year, also known as the Festival of Weeks, and the 50th day of counting the Omer. So, with Luke telling us that Jesus spent 40 days with the apostles, speaking of things pertaining to the kingdom of God, I believe that the true Pentecost was when the Jews were all gathered in Jerusalem for Shavuot. It just makes sense to me. And just one more reason that I tend to be mainly focused on what the Jews are doing and when they are observing their feast or fast days. Well, also, just the fact that all of our major events are happening on the Hebrew calendar dates. All the blood moons and tetrads going back over 70 years, and the significance of our major eclipses and other signs in the heavens, and even the war beginning in Israel. All day counts of everything that I've seen so far are exactly on target. So I will never be one to toss all that out the window. Actually, there are major events that happened even 33 years ago. And even the blood moon eclipsing Uranus before the Night of Broken Glass back in 1938, and what happened 333 days later, just like Israel being attacked 333 days after the last time we had a blood moon eclipsing Uranus. So many events in the heavens and on earth that are directly tied to the Hebrew calendar. There are still even more prophetic signs in the heavens coming up this year. A really big one is the second of only 2 solar eclipses this year. The first one was April 8th, which ended the Jewish year, which was so huge. And I'll show you in this video a crazy connection to that eclipse on April 8th. And the next solar eclipse will be October 2nd, a ring of fire eclipse being cast to the earth to usher in the Feast of Trumpets. And I'll have to talk about that one when I get to my video concerning the prophecy of the last pope. And I'm really hoping that a rapture happens before we see that event. Over the past 7 years, I've only had about 3 dates that I really felt something big was going to happen. And they are still major key dates or events on my timeline. Hopefully, I can really start working on some videos that attempt to pull everything together, like in one long story. But it's certainly not something I can do in just a week or two. And it would end up being more like what I'm calling a video book, like separated into many chapters or videos. It would definitely include all the things I've been showing on my channel this year. But so far, I've only talked about maybe 5% of what I could be showing. And it just feels like such an overwhelming task. After I've been putting out hundreds of teaching videos over the past 4 years, there's just a lot to talk about and a lot of ground to cover. It's hard to know where to even start with a project like that, but that's what I'm planning on doing going forward. Mostly what I've been showing this year are events from the book of Revelation, like the Revelation 7 sign and the Revelation 15 sign, and the filling of the vials of wrath from chapter 14 and 15. And a lot of stuff about the wedding ring eclipse of October 14th, as well as things like the longest blood moon in 33 years, and then 333 days later was the attack on Israel. That blood moon was also exactly 42 months to the day after Israel celebrated turning 71 back in 2019. And starting into the Moses prophecy. And with the help of a friend pointing it out to me, but exactly 84 years prior, there was another blood moon in that same spot beneath the feet of Aries, the same place where the sun traversed while Jesus was in the tomb. Both of those blood moons, exactly 84 years apart, eclipsing Uranus during those blood moons, eclipsing a planet named Heaven, which is all about Anna in Luke chapter 2, the widow in the temple. Both of those blood moons, 84 years apart, signaled major events and turning points in the history of the Jews. Events that would happen exactly 333 days later, each time. Besides the 2 worldwide signals that went out concerning the 144,000, signals that were 42 months apart, there was also another worldwide signal that went out on Phi Day last year, when the 7 thunders happened, which I'll talk more about today, because it is directly tied to Jonah's story as well. So today should be a fun one with Jonah's adventure. I wanted to point out today a find to my last video that Scooby-Doo posted in the comments section. I was talking about how if you take the length of an age, which is approximately 2,160 years, and you divide the time, like both Daniel and John talked about, the time times and half a time, which is 3.5, then it comes out to 617 and a small fraction. So I dropped the fraction and looked up the number 617 in Strong's Concordance and found that Greek word number 617 is a word that is only found 4 times in the New Testament, and it is about the stone being rolled away from the tomb of Jesus when he had risen. Such an elegant reference to what the entire age of Pisces was really all about. Jesus Christ, who had risen from the dead and paid the price for all of us to enter into the kingdom of God, and the rolling away of that stone from the grave for a time, times, and half a time. God is always so amazing how he works out things like that. A simple word number meaning the stone that was rolled away from the tomb, and multiplied by a time, times, and half a time to get to the length of the age, the church age. And most agree that a time, times, and half a time is also the length of Jesus' ministry on earth. And then Scooby-Doo pointed out that the very verse in the book of Daniel, verse 6:17, is also about the stone set and sealed over what would have been Daniel's tomb as well, that den of lions. And when the stone was rolled away, King Darius was so overjoyed that he sent out a decree that every dominion of his kingdom should fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, because he is the living God. Seeing that even in Daniel's book, the stone that was set and sealed and then rolled away to the glory and power of God Almighty was also verse 6:17. That really blew my socks off. The Bible has so many amazing hidden secrets that I don't think we could ever discover them all. Also, to get started today, I fixed this screenshot to show October 7th of 2023 because my previous capture in Stellarium was from 2024. I'm not sure why I didn't fix it when I made the video in the first place. The sun isn't really going to change from one year to the next, so I must have been feeling lazy or something. The sun's position on God's clock on any given date will only shift by the space of one day every 128 years. Like I was saying in that video, the sun will rise in the same place on God's clock on your birthday every year, throughout your whole life, perhaps only shifting ever so slightly if you live to be as old as I am. But since our backdrop of stars does appear to move extremely slowly over time, it does make a difference over 2,000 years, which is what I was showing here. These two side-by-side captures show the 2,000-year difference. So this is the corrected scene here. It looks the same as I was showing before. On the left is where the sun was on God's clock the day Jesus was born, on 9/11 of 3 BC. And you have to set Stellarium for 2 BC because it counts the 0 year. On the right side is October 7th, the day the war began in Israel. It is the star date of Jesus' birthday. Our current date of October 7th, Jesus' birthday. This is an overall picture of 9/11 of 3 BC, and you can see it is very reminiscent of the Revelation 12 sign. This is just after sunset, with the moon there at Virgo's feet too. And also we have our king planet Jupiter in conjunction with the king star Regulus in the heart of Leo. A very significant conjunction. There is a lot more to talk about when it comes to star signs with the conjunctions of 3 BC, and also what happened exactly 33 years ago as the sun was setting over Jerusalem to start 9/11 back in 1991. In a way, that celestial event was a big start to the end of days Watchman community. But today I wanted to show you some other stuff. So here is the other pic that I've corrected now. At the top here is what I was just showing. And then at the bottom, I'm showing the 8th day later for both those years, which would be the day Jesus first entered the temple in Jerusalem to be circumcised on his 8th day. And then the day of the wedding ring eclipse, the ring of fire of October 14th last year. That eclipse made the second giant mark across the U.S. So I think these pics line up perfectly with John's Gospel at the great eighth day of tabernacle scene, with Nicodemus at the end of chapter 7, matching October 7th. And the start of the war on Israel's great eighth day of tabernacles. Then John gives us chapter 8, when Jesus stooped down twice to make his mark of judgment on the ground, matching up with the wedding ring eclipse that happened on the eighth day later, when John writes that Jesus came again into the temple, early in the morning. It's the woman caught in adultery scene, the wedding ring eclipse as well, to remind Israel of God's covenant, to perfectly match up with the first time Jesus ever entered the temple in Jerusalem, to make his Abrahamic covenant with God on his eighth day of life. In John's Gospel, when Jesus stoops down to make his second mark on the ground, is even chapter 8, verse 8, the 88, the exact verse where it says, "And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground." Eclipse number 2. John 88. And it was 88 more days until January 11th, the 111 date that many others have pointed out as being the center of the eclipse cycles. And then 88 more days until the third and final mark across the U.S. on April 8th. I know some of this video is a little bit of a fast recap of things, and hopefully everyone has seen a lot of these pics before, as I've been posting some of them for a while now. This is the Revelation 15 sign that happened on 3/13, the 313 of God's heavenly menorah. It also happened on the third day of the 13th month on the Hebrew calendar. And I've also been showing the Revelation 7 sign too, which also happened on the 313 date back in 2016. And also that year, it was the third day of the 13th month on the Jewish Hebrew calendar. These signs in the heavens falling on these dates of 313 are 8 years apart and 8 chapters apart. And there's that 88 again. But besides the significance of the 313 being the 3 candles, 1 candle, and 3 candles of God's menorah, of the 7 candlesticks of Revelation, but the 13 is also the day of the greatest betrayal in history, Nisan 13, and the Last Supper, the big lie, the broken covenant, the betrayal, the arrest, and the binding, and then the great denial, the 13th day. And in Strong's Concordance, the Greek word number 313 is a word only found twice in the New Testament, and it is a word only used by Peter, meaning born again. In Peter's first epistle, 1 Peter 1:3 and 1:2-3, born again. So let's go back to our picture here of Jesus' birth dates, of 9/11 in the past, which would correspond to our current date of October 7th. If John the Baptist was born 6 months before Jesus, then what are John the Baptist's birth dates? A year is 365 days, so 6 months is 182 and a half days. I think we can just drop the half a day business. 9/11 minus 182 days is March 13th, 313 of 3 BC, 313-3. the same dates as both the Revelation 7 sign and the Revelation 15 sign. If you want to know what John the Baptist's birth date would be in our current times, then it would be October 7th minus 182 days, which is April 8th, the date of the final eclipse. These are the Stellarium screenshots of 182 days before Jesus was born, and what the star date would be during our current times, 182 days before October 7th. If Mary went into labor when they blew the trumpets for Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets, in 3 BC, and if John the Baptist was born exactly 6 months prior, then this is the star date that John the Baptist was born. And it's an exact match to the current star date of April 8th, the final great American eclipse that just happened on April 8th of 2024. One thing I wanted to stop and say about when they blow the trumpets for the New Year's or New Month, and it's easy to study this out in Stellarium or just observe what's happening currently. But when the sliver of the new moon is sighted and they blow the trumpets at sundown, it seems that the day that just occurred is marked as the first of the month or the new year. And I think that causes a lot of confusion with people, saying the Jews are one day off with their calendars, as I think everyone realized that there was no way that the sliver of the new moon could have been sighted at sundown on April 8th, because we were having an eclipse that day. However, if, in theory, they could have sighted a sliver of the moon the sundown the day after the eclipse, then that day that just ended would be marked as day 1. I hope that makes sense. When the new moon is first sighted and they blow the trumpets, that is the end of day 1, and their new month has started. It's just what it always looks like to me on their calendars, no matter what time in history I'm looking at Stellarium stuff. Rosh Hashanah, or Feast of Trumpets, was September 10th in 3 BC. After working on all this stuff as much as I do, and working a lot of things out on my own before I discovered this scientific calendar, I've come to trust what this website calendar is saying about dates throughout history. They've even clocked all the equinoxes and solstices down to the minute. And they say that Rosh Hashanah was September 10th in 3 BC. And looking at these two Stellarium shots, you can see that the new moon could not have been sighted at sundown on the 9th to proclaim that the Feast of Trumpets and day 1 was just beginning. The moon actually set before the sun did that day. They would have been blowing the trumpets at sundown on the 10th and proclaiming that day 1 of the new year had just ended, just as they would have done in theory on April 9th this year for Nisan 1, the day following the April 8th eclipse. Because as we all know, on the Hebrew calendar, Nisan 1 started at sundown on the day of the April 8th eclipse. Hopefully I'm not just confusing everyone. What I'm basically getting at is this, that I believe that Mary went into labor when they blew the trumpets at sundown on the 10th of September, which was Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets. And Jesus was born on September 11th. From what I've read, this thing of not really proclaiming the new year until the moon is sighted at the end of day 1, this is exactly why the Feast of Trumpets lasts for 2 days. so everyone can be sure to celebrate their new year. I don't know if Rosh Hashanah was a 2-day celebration back in 3 BC, but I've read that the 2-day celebration of the New Year is something that goes back to at least 70 AD. So it's nothing new. There are also other rules about what days Rosh Hashanah can even fall on, so that even adds more confusion to the mix. Anyway, I thought that was a fun one if people hadn't realized that John the Baptist's birth date would have been on 313 BC, and currently John the Baptist's birth date would be April 8th, the date of our third and final great American eclipse. And I think it is just more confirmation of the Revelation 7 and 15 signs that both happened on 313, no matter if you are using our calendar or the Hebrew calendar. And it all just points to the 13th day, and the betrayal and arrest and the binding. Oh, I haven't even gotten into the prophecy of the last pope yet, by our hero, Saint Malachi, which is going to take a whole video just in itself. But the last pope, number 112, that was prophesied, climbed up on his throne on 313:13. I mean, the odds of all this just being a coincidence is insane. And speaking of Saint Malachi, one more thing to really think about, because for years I've been watching all the prophecies of the New Testament being fulfilled in ways I've never even thought of, but I've seen it all happen. I know everyone is expecting Elijah, but Jesus said on more than one occasion that John the Baptist was Elijah. He said that because of the prophecies of Malachi, the final verses of the Old Testament. And what was going on when we start the New Testament? Everyone is asking about Elijah and expecting Elijah to show up. Even the Pharisees were asking John the Baptist if he was Elijah. And at the Mount of Transfiguration, when Elijah and Moses appeared and spake with Jesus of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem, as it clearly states in Luke's Gospel. I'm showing here on my screen Luke chapter 9, verse 30 and 31, where it is written, quote, "And behold, there talked with him 2 men, which were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory, and spake of his decease, which he should accomplish at Jerusalem." In the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, the apostles asked Jesus, "Why say the scribes that Elijah must first come?" And Jesus told them that Elijah is come already, and they knew him not, and they have done unto him whatsoever they listed, as it is written of him. And that's when the apostles realized that Jesus was talking about John the Baptist. So, isn't all this talk of expecting Elijah to appear first simply another fulfillment of the New Testament prophecies? In Mark and Matthew's Gospels, even at the crucifixion, they were all still waiting for Elijah to show up. Just something to ponder on. And another thing I wanted to say about most every place in my videos. I will definitely be doing it 100% of the time in my video book, whenever I bring up or talk about a particular scripture, as I've always done for years in my videos. I will put up on the screen the exact text from the King James Version, so people can pause the video and read the text for themselves. I've even been accused of lying about things when I post the exact words from the Bible on my screen. I don't know if those people are totally blind or if they just don't know how to read or what. But I will always back up everything I say with the actual words written in the Bible. And I often show you in eSword and or in the Blue Letter Bible the meaning of certain Greek and Hebrew words as well. Trying to make the type of videos that I make is extremely time-consuming. On top of thousands of hours of research that I have invested over the years. But I just wanted to say that when I do make my serious, no-fluff video book, I will show every single biblical reference in the video and not just quickly rattle off some chapter and verse that I'm talking about. One of my major pet peeves is people that simply talk a giant pile of nonsense in their videos without ever showing one scrap of scriptures to back up anything they are saying. And if you actually know or read the scriptures for yourself, you and I both know that the scriptures that they are jabbering nonsense about do not even come close to actually saying what they claim they are saying. So I just wanted to be clear about that. My video book will be proving every single thing that I'm saying. The other night, I even went through Stellarium and wrote down all the dates when one of God's 7 luminaries of his grand menorah passed through the waters of Aquarius since the beginning of 2012. And I think once people see how rare it really is, it might help see the impossible odds of these signs in the heavens that I've been showing. And to anyone who is about to get in a big twist, saying that my channel is astrology, you have no idea who God even is, or what sort of power he has as the creator of all the universe. Nor do you have any idea that he sets signs in the heavens like fireworks, and specifically told everyone to look for these signs. So Jupiter crossed the line of the waters of Aquarius way back on 2/22/22, and it takes Jupiter nearly 2 days to cross the line. And on 2/24/22, Putin crossed the line into the Ukraine to start that war. Jupiter won't be back around to cross the line again until a decade from now, in 2034. That's how rare that event is, exactly when the war in Ukraine started. And right when Jupiter, number 1, filled his vial of wrath as the sun clothed him in pure white. I'm building a place right now where I can start uploading a lot of screenshots from my videos and spreadsheets and notes and stuff like this chart that I made concerning the waters of Aquarius. So people can simply save them to their computer and won't have to take so many notes on stuff I'm showing in my videos. I'll be going over this chart more in my video book, but you can easily see things like what Saturn is up to. Saturn has not passed through the waters of Aquarius since early 1995, nearly 30 years ago, and will not be circling around again until the year 2053, 30 years from now. But this year, in 2024, Saturn is crossing that line 3 times. The first time to take his place in the lineup of God's heavenly menorah of the Revelation 15 sign and get his vial filled. Saturn will go retrograde next month, and be sitting exactly on the line of the waters of Aquarius during the next eclipse at Rosh Hashanah, when a ring of fire will be cast over Easter Island of all places, as well as right over Argentina, where the final pope from the prophecy is from. And when Saturn appears to get going again, he will again cross the waters of Aquarius on Christmas Eve. I hope I'm not around for all that. While Jupiter took his place perfectly in the menorah of 313 this year, and even right at the foot of Aries, where the sun was on the day Jesus was crucified, his place in the menorah of God's 7 luminaries, when Jupiter is not going to be passing this way again for another decade. What are the chances of all that happening? And Venus was crossing the line of the waters during the Turkey earthquakes back in 2023. Last year, seal number 7, and it was off to the races. Or that at the break of dawn on the day of the 7 thunders and the implosion of the Titan to the grave, and that wildly impossible Schumann resonance anomaly, both the sun and the moon ascended exactly together. And as I've been saying, this war in the heavens is about the sun, Jesus Christ, the light of the world, versus the moon, Israel, the widowed bride, who will never admit that she is a widow. Just as John writes in Revelation chapter 18, as a voice from heaven said, "For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her." Some say the whole world has become Babylon and the widowed bride, or that the moon perhaps represents the church, which has become this harlot of Babylon. All may be true, but it is a battle against Jesus Christ, the light of the world. The next total solar eclipse will be on the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, on October 2nd this year, and it will be eclipsing Easter Island and Argentina, where the Pope is from, while Saturn is crossing the line of Aquarius for the second time in 30 years, and the first time in 30 years was just a few weeks ago. That's going to be a fun video, but all that is for later. Today, I really want to talk about Jonah's adventure too. This one just totally blew my mind, and it gets so deep when I really start thinking about it all, and all the deeper levels of the meanings. So I went to find Jonah's eclipse on Stellarium. I read that it occurred on June 15th of 763 BC. At first, I set my location to Mosul, because they say that Nineveh was not far from modern-day Mosul. I noticed that when I zoomed in super close, it was not an absolutely perfect eclipse, because I could still see a teeny tiny little sliver of the sun. So I looked on this map here. I've got Mosul circled in blue, and the area where Nineveh is said to have been. And I found the name of a town in Stellarium that was much closer to the coast, called Rehanli. Perhaps it was very close to where Jonah might have been burped out onto the coast. And I saw that there really was a perfect coverage of the sun from that vantage point. It sure seems to fit our story. I also noticed the interesting fact that during the eclipse, Jupiter and Mercury were very near the sun as well on that day. So I was thinking about how some people say that it was because of this eclipse that Jonah was thrown overboard. Actually, they say that Jonah was thrown overboard during the eclipse, and I've actually become convinced of that now. Eclipses were always seen as a bad omen back then. Well, I guess our recent 3 eclipses across the U.S. have been seen as very bad omens as well. It's been the talk of the Watchman community for years, and it still is. These were great signs that John specifically wrote about in both Revelation and his Gospel. Across many ancient cultures, the moon was often thought of as a great dragon in the sky, taking a big bite out of the sun during an eclipse. And if the eclipse is completely total, they saw it as the great dragon totally devouring the sun. In Jonah's story, the men are having a very hard trip, and on some very turbulent seas, as it is written in our hero's tale. And Jonah, being caught by the captain, simply hiding out down below and sleeping through it all, while it sounds like everyone else was in the fight of their lives and casting all their cargo overboard. And then, when the men found out that Jonah, who had been busy sleeping, was actually doing much the same with God, shirking and actually trying to run and hide from a task that the Lord had ordered him to do. The men, deciding it was all Jonah's fault, asked Jonah what they should do with him. Jonah agreed that it was his fault, so he told them to just cast him into the sea, and the sea would be calm. The others were all reluctant to do such a thing. After all, they weren't a band of murderers. So they tried to get the ship to shore, but the storm was too much. And if you ask me, I think the eclipse was beginning through all this. And by the time the great dragon in the sky had completely devoured the sun, and the world went cold and dark as night, they cried out to the Lord that they not perish for the life of Jonah, and prayed that the Lord not lay upon them innocent blood. Which reminds me so much of Pilate's words too. Just before Jesus was cast out by his own brethren and put into the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So perhaps when the eclipse happened, Jonah was tossed overboard. And in the story, we read that the sea ceased from her raging. I think the sun was again starting to appear. And it says that the men feared the Lord and offered sacrifice and made vows. But we read that the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of that fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Chapter 2 is always my favorite, as Jonah cries out to God. Out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice. Poor Jonah. But we know that God gave Jonah a second chance, and he completed his task. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. But the people of Nineveh took Jonah seriously and repented of their evil ways. Perhaps Jonah reminded them of the eclipse that had just happened as well, as proof of their soon demise. And God decided not to destroy Nineveh after all, at least not at that time. Much like John in Revelation, when told he must prophesy again. Jonah was feeling quite bitter in his belly over the whole affair, as we read that it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry, and even told God twice that it was better for him to die than to live. And God asked Jonah twice, "Doest thou well to be angry?" And Jonah said, "I do well to be angry even unto death." I love Jonah. So I was also thinking about how a total solar eclipse like that is much like a giant stone being rolled over a grave, as the moon slowly rolls across and blocks out all the sunlight. And I was looking at the numbers here. If Jonah was cast to his death during the eclipse on the morning of the 15th of June, then he would have spent the 15th, 16th, and 17th, and the night of the 17th would have been the 3 days and 3 nights. So he would have been spit out onto dry land on June 18th. And as I've been going over in a few videos recently, June 18th is known as Phi Day, the 618, God's divine number, and the secrets to the universe and life itself. And if you count 40 days from Phi Day of 2023, when the 7 thunders happened, the 40th day, yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown, as Jonah's warning went out. The 40th day was the 9th of Av of 2023. It's the day the Jews mourn the destruction of their temple. I think the second temple was destroyed on the 10th of Av, and the first temple was destroyed on the 7th of Av. But the Jews always mourn the loss of both of their temples on the 9th of Av each year. And from 618 and that crazy Schumann resonance anomaly on Phi Day, the 7 thunders day, and the day that I think Jonah was given his second chance, yet 40 days, is the 9th of Av. I see now that I probably should add that to my 7 thunders page here. My page is going to start becoming a mess. That's why it's so impossible for people to really make big overall timelines. It just gets to be too much with each and every little incident along the way, and all the connections involved. And I should also note here that while it was 111 days from the 7 thunders to the day Israel was attacked, it was also 111 years since the Titanic had been buried. And another crazy thing, speaking of the Titans and Jonah getting spit out, or perhaps even being resurrected, the raising of the Titan Jonah on Phi Day is that the man ultimately responsible for the destruction of the Second Temple was Titus, whose name means Titan of the Giants. Yet 40 days. Well, I think it's obvious from Jonah's story, but God really does give second chances. And thinking about those dates again of John the Baptist and Jesus being 6 months apart, and what are the odds of their birth dates being, for Jesus, 9/11 of 3 BC and October 7th currently? For John the Baptist, 313 BC, the very image of God's menorah of his 7 spirits that he sends forth into all the earth, as many of the prophets talked about, from Zechariah to John the Apostle. And for both the Revelation 7 and 15 signs to have happened on the 3:13 dates as well. And for John the Baptist's current star date, birth date, of April 8th, when God himself stooped down and made his third mark across the U.S. as the Aleph and the Tav of all creation. And now I've got Jonah given his second chance on 6/18, Phi Day of 763 BC. So with John the Baptist and Jesus being 6 months apart, and seeing the truth of the numbers, I simply added the 6 months or 182 days to Phi Day to see what was going on here. And it is December 17th. As I've pointed out several times, the date of the prophecy of the last pope, St. Peter the Roman, began on 3/13/13. December 17th is his birthday, the exact 182 day count from the 7 Thunders Day and the Titan. And something I've only mentioned in passing at this point, but Daniel's 1335 day count has everything to do with the prophecy of the last pope and what's been happening at St. Peter's Basilica. And just a few months back, on the Pope's birthday, December 17th of 2023, old St. Peter the Roman statue was struck by lightning in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where he is from, and totally blew that big key out of his right hand. And it seems it might have blown that halo right off his head as well. Perhaps there is a reason Peter is the only one who ever used the Greek word number 313, which means born again. 1 Peter 1:3 and 1:2-3. The story of St. Peter the Roman is one of my favorites, but it will have to wait until later. I'll be back when I can find the time, or better yet, we all get raptured out of here first. Peace out, my friends.